Yeah, they're going to have to do it up there. Okay. I wouldn't have been here at all if it were not for fellow Hoosier James Woods, who I worked with, and almost every day he would not leave me alone with his constant sermonizing about some obscure man in his 2-century-old writings. But the truth is, if it wasn't for him, that marvelous man, I would never have come to the Academy, and I wouldn't be here today, and neither would you. My deepest regret is that I didn't have the opportunity to thank him for the dramatic impact he had on my life and the wonderful gift he'd given me. And that gift I pass on today. Now, that foreign place, the Academy, college, by the time I had left it, had become very special to me. As those of you who are here or know and have gone through it, it can do that. And so profound was my affection for it, and all that it had given this simple boy from the corn and soybean fields of Indiana, that I wanted to give something back, something important, something special. For me, it became finding a way to explain how the divine in a non-dimensional realm creates time and space and all that is within it, and to present it in a way that a rational mind can understand it. About 7 years ago, so you can see that long period before I actually started to operate on this was almost 40 years before I began to start down that road and that journey. But about 7 years ago, I became involved with Ian Thompson and Steve Smith in what we called the Creation Project. I had wanted, since the years at Bryn, to come up with a plausible, rational explanation for the creation that would appeal to those who were open to the idea of spirituality, but unable to get beyond the literal interpretation of Genesis. We wanted to, in that group, we wanted to integrate Swedenborg's writings with modern physics in a way that would provide a credible foundation for those seeking a deeper understanding, to put forth a credible case for a divine creation. Now, the Theistic Science Group, was formed by me and Forrest Tristy over 2 years ago in the new church at Boynton Beach, Florida. And with the addition of Reuben Bell and his thesis on intelligent default, which he mentioned earlier, and theoretical physicist at the Lawrence Livermore Labs and author of Starting Science from God, Ian Thompson, we grew. Those unable to make it locally Skype in from wherever they happen to be at the time. So the group has focused on basic questions to deal with to try to get to our goal. First was how influx into the natural world shows itself and can be observed in physics. And if natural things and processes are derived from spiritual causes, how can they be described in scientific terms? Also, using Swedenborg's doctrine from his theological work, the Theistic Science Group asks, how does spirit descend into nature, creating it as it comes, but not becoming it? Can causal closure of the universe explain all natural behavior? And what is the minimum changes required in physics to allow for divine influx to operate? We started out trying to describe in symbolic terms what divine influx was from its first proceeding through the spiritual world, bringing into existence time and space and all that was in the natural world. We concluded that the first observable effects of divine influx was the presence of quantum fields and their associated subatomic particles. Sustained by continuous influx and through the coupling of these quantum fields, There developed ever-increasing complexity, from atoms to molecules to macroorganic molecules to the human form. We will be proposing today that influx into the natural world does show itself, and we will be doing so not in the language of Genesis, but in the language of the physicists themselves. Unlike so many religious criticisms that just seek to discredit science, we will offer possible solutions to help science answer some of their intractable questions. We will hear today about spiritual and physical subdegrees, which will show the correspondence of spiritual degrees with their physical counterparts. To demonstrate these principles, we will focus on organic forms, but more specifically on protein molecules to demonstrate a scientific case for divine influx. No, we're not going to prove the existence of God today. What we can do is move powerfully in that direction scientifically. Imagine if we could demonstrate a scientific phenomena with few, if any, causal factors, leaving no explanation for that phenomenon within the boundaries of a causal closure universe, one which causes are initiated from within that universe. We're going to take you on such a journey today. The writings say that the new church will not be established by miracles, but by enlightenment. So we don't always have to prove things absolutely. Sometimes it is enough to put forth a proposition that is so scientifically strong that it has the same effect, which is opening the minds for a new way of thinking and the acceptance of a new scientific paradigm. If you look up theistic science in Wikipedia, it is described as a pseudoscientific proposal that the normal scientific method of testability be replaced by one allowing for occasional supernatural explanations, which are essentially untestable. Testability has always been the primary weakness for supernatural propositions, but today we will attempt to meet that challenge. That will be one of two challenges we face. The first is the science. The second one masquerades as science, but it really isn't science at all. It relates to the willingness to consider theories and research apart from personal and cultural biases, external societal and career pressures as well. Many in academia have learned, and in many cases painfully, that there are just some scientific lines that you do not cross, no matter how compelling the scientific evidence. In these cases, it no longer becomes a search for the truth, but more about avoiding conflicts with accepted scientific dogma. The academic and political pressures of nonconformity can be enormous, along with the consequences. I refer to this period as the anti-enlightenment. A recent example of this was Peter Ridd, who was fired by James Cook University in Australia when his 30 years of research concluded that there was no harmful effect on coral reefs from global warming, thus challenging the orthodoxy at the college, the university. He was fired. Now, we go a step further here in our sense, and that is the more religious sense. Research that borders on the spiritual is strictly taboo, but that is what we are proposing today. We're just going to do it a little bit indirectly. We're going to kind of go in the back door. Now, the stronger the scientific or theistic science case that is made, the stronger will be the resistance. But that will also be a sign that we have made the theoretical physicists uncomfortable. They are not made that way when confronted with weak arguments using tired religious rhetoric. only when long-held dogmatic beliefs are being credibly challenged. So today, we break the shell and we introduce the idea of dualism, thereby challenging causal closure of the universe, and we do so using the language of science. Science to demonstrate it, and the writings to explain it. We will have 4 speakers today from this group that reflect the work of the Theistic Science Group over the last 2 years. First, Ruben Bell will speak on the emergence of organic forms, and he will have an introduction too regarding further rationale for the Theistic Science Group, and he explains where we are starting from and the intellectual context in which we are working. He then proposes the concept of intelligent default, which is the title of the book he just showed you there earlier. And he also will talk about default settings for matter as being configurations in various conditions. He then discusses evolution, natural selection, macroevolution, and the Cambrian explosion and how they fit into a new theistic science catechism. Next, Andy Heilman will talk about discrete degrees in New Church science under the idea conservation is perpetual creation. A brief look at how creation and the conservation of what is created takes place, with a focus on the 3 forces, active, creative, and formative, and how they relate to correspondence, influx, and discrete degrees, both in the spiritual and in the natural world. And next, Ian Thompson will follow up with his discussion on discrete degrees using enneads. From Swedenborg, we hear that there are principally 3 discrete degrees for love, wisdom, and use, essentially dealing with end, means, and effect. These details are in everything, and if God is present in the same way in parts as in wholes, then there will be subdegrees. Instead of a triad of 3 degrees, we will end up with 9 subdegrees. In Greek, the 9 being ennead. Ian's talk will show a plan of the ennead in nature. These internal details in subdegrees with physics, especially in quantum physics. Ian tells us that Swedenborg's ideas helped him a great deal to make sense of modern physics. He also tells us that we cannot yet understand some of these degrees and discusses quantum reality. Okay, then we'll break for lunch and we come back. Andy, and it will be Steve Smith who will talk to us at that point, and he will be giving us a presentation on protein synthesis and fine-tuning in physics and biology. Steve will introduce and discuss the mechanics of protein biology, which will help lay the groundwork for what Ian's presentation that follows. He will discuss the spiritual correspondence of amino acids, bonding of protein molecules along with the stages of protein formation. He will also introduce a very interesting concept, Levinthal's paradox. This is an important idea and plays a critical part in opening the door to a new paradigm that considerations of influx into the forces consideration of influx into the natural world. The first 4 presentations are really going to lay the groundwork and set the stage for the last one given by Ian. Ian will present a proposal that will demonstrate a scientific mechanism for influx acting in nature and showing itself in physics, and in the process confirming Swedenborg's writings concerning the actual effects influx has in nature. The questions he'll be dealing with are, how does influx show itself in physics if it is visible there? Physicists have not yet observed it. And what are the inmost or finest things in nature? And what in physics would have to be changed and for how long for divine influx to operate? Now, this is a new idea, one that should be testable once we know what to look for and one that will put final causes back into consideration. In the second part of his talk, he will explain plausible details for his first physics subdegree and how it could work in practice, being usefully employed in living organisms, or, for example, to manage the molecular functions of life. He will show videos of the results of calculations for how proteins fold efficiently. We will then have a panel, which will be moderated by Dan Sinisvit, and then I'll give some closing summary remarks on that.